What's up everybody, Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video. And in this video, we're going to talk about how to improve your mechanical skill and click more heads in Valorant. A lot of players, especially those of you who watch this channel, are incredibly smart when it comes to the game. But the reality is, if you don't have the mechanical skills to back it up, a good play can turn into a bad play, and you're just never gonna climb. So let's fix it from the ground up, talk about how to improve your mechanical skills step by step, so that you can start to click heads and dominate. But the GameLeap website's the best place to quickly climb. We have in-depth mechanical guides, tips and tricks to find your sensitivity, perfect warm-up drills, and so much more. Do yourself a favor and go check it out right now, down below. Now, a lot of players will fail at trying to improve their aim very quickly because they try to work on everything at once and they don't know the differences in what they're actually trying to improve. So let's break it down into 4 different types of aim. The first type is the raw mechanics, or learning FPS mechanics. Essentially, this is learning how to aim, not just in Valorant, but just any game. It's just learning how to control your mouse properly. And first is sensitivity. Now, something that you should typically do when you're trying to find your perfect sensitivity is try and explore. Change it, try out a sensitivity for a while, adjust it as needed. It's really good for you and your development as a player to get really comfortable with controlling your mouse on a number of different sensitivities and finding what perfectly fits you. Also, try to notice certain things about how you're aiming and how you can make that easier on yourself. Like, for instance, let's say your sensitivity is pretty high and it allows you to easily 180 on flashes and things like that. However, when you're trying to aim at someone pretty far away, you can't aim, you can't keep it straight, or in order to be perfectly accurate at that range, you have to tense up your arm so much that you're putting extra strain on your arm, on your wrist, and it's really uncomfortable. Well, if you turn down your sensitivity, you get a bigger mouse pad. Now, you could put a lot less strain on your arm, and you could achieve the same thing while being less rough on your arm and putting less pressure. But that's gonna be different for every single person. So it's really important for you to not only notice what sensitivities are working, but be honest with yourself about shots that you could potentially hit or miss, depending on if your sensitivity was lower or even higher. In this stage, you're also gonna wanna find a comfortable mouse. I typically suggest a mouse that is made for FPS gaming, not something that has a million buttons or is incredibly bulky, and of course, a mouse pad. Even if you're gonna play on high sensitivity, you still wanna have a really big mouse pad so that you're comfortable and you can actually get a feel for what you like, the movements that you're making, and a really consistent, high quality, reliable pad is gonna make it so that there's not inconsistencies in the sensor, so that's definitely suggested. Now, of course, in this section, you're also gonna be practicing tracking, flicking, and doing something like aim training. This is what someone would do when they're first playing an FPS on PC. They wanna really learn how to actually flick to targets, and typically, this is what you're gonna do right off the bat. I think that if you're a brand new player, you're gonna benefit from aim training the most. While this becomes less and less important the more time you actually spend on FPSs in general, it is pretty important to start off with if you want to reach yourself to a certain level of mechanical skill or baseline mechanical FPS skill right off the bat. Now, the next stage is Valorant weapon mechanics. So this is a little bit different than just your raw FPS mechanics. This has to do with the weaponry you're going to be using in Valorant. So you could do this easily by shooting bots, and it's stuff like counter strafing, properly knowing when your weapon is first shot accurate. Things like recoil control and when to burst, when to spray, how to burst and how to spray, and the differences in your weaponry. You're really getting used to how to shoot each weapon the most optimal way. Now, there's not a super fast track into learning this. Typically, you have to just experience every single weapon and practice with it as much as you can. And you could do this, like I said, by shooting bots. You could even do this in deathmatch, learning how to utilize every weapon and really trying to overlap your raw mechanical FPS skills over top what is inside Valorant, because, you know, it's Valorant specific, right? If you're a really great Apex player or a really great Counter-Strike player, not all of that is gonna perfectly transfer to the weaponry, the recoil, the counter strafing of Valorant in particular. So that's what you're really doing in this section. And you're gonna wanna keep doing this over time, becoming more and more comfortable with these weapons, learning how to maximize your effectiveness with some of these, and that's what we call litmus testing, trying to push them to the brink and actually see how much you can get away with some of these weapons, and then the discipline also involved in proper counter strafing. Notice when every single time you take that first shot, is your bullet going where you're aiming when you take that first shot? Or are your bullets flying off for the first couple of shots? And you need to basically just keep fine-tuning how you utilize these weapons and get better and better at these micro mechanics in Valorant. Now, this is gonna lead us to the next section of mechanical skill, which is all about gunfights, consistency in duels. And this has to do with how you're fighting in game, right? Your distance from the angle. This is something that is knowledge-based, but it's important. If you're too close to an angle when the enemy is further away and you're peeking it slightly, the enemy might be able to see you a lot more than you could see them. It's also practicing the type of fights that you're taking when you're holding an angle versus challenging or peeking. And this is going to play directly into what you've learned before. It's going to be a lot easier to peek and challenge if you're consistent with your counter strafing and your first shot accuracy when you're swinging that angle. So these are things that are going to tie directly in together or build on top of each other. Another part of this is crosshair placement, and crosshair placement is ultimately map knowledge. How much do you know about the map? Where are people likely to position? Where are people likely to hold? And when you're swinging around an angle and you got that perfect counter strafing, you're using the gun that you've practiced with, you got that raw mechanical skill, you swing around the angle and you're pre-aiming a spot where players often play, where players often hold, where someone could hold, and an enemy's right there, it's super easy for you to get that kill because everything lines up just perfectly. And that's gonna take map knowledge. And this is another section where there's not really a shortcut here. The only way to get good crosshair placement is to, one, be disciplined with it. Don't get lazy with it. If you're crossing through main, if you're crossing through any angle that an enemy could possibly be disciplined and peek the angles where they could be holding based on prior known information and map knowledge. And the second part is just playing the game and taking note of where people are holding, how people are holding certain angles. And when you walk into a room, how are you going to effectively clear every single angle that an enemy could be tucked into? A great way to actually do this, the best, in my opinion, is on deathmatch. Now, it's not going to be the best strategy for winning deathmatch, but if you just walk through a deathmatch and you clear every angle as if you have no information and you need to clear every single angle an enemy could be holding, that's gonna make your clearing in game a lot better. And of course, the last aspect to gunfights is just effective range. How far are you away from the target? How should you fight an enemy based on what weapon you have? These are all things that you will get a feel for over time, and it's important to think about before you take a duel in game because it's gonna help your consistency. Now, after that, the last stage to this is advantage fights or tactics, or a better way to put it is setting up unfair fights. So after you have the raw mechanics and the Valorant weapon mechanics, and you're learning that and you're working on gunfights and consistency in duels, the advanced fighting tactics is how you take it a step above and apply tactics to your mechanical skill to get more kills overall. So there are ways in which you can take a duel that will make it more likely for you to win a duel, because you got to remember, mechanics are something that everyone is working on and everyone is good to a certain extent. And the higher you climb, the better they're gonna be. You can't just take a 50-50 with people every single time and pray that your mechanics are better. You want to make it so that you could set up unfair fight after unfair fight, and this also allows you a certain amount of leeway in your mechanics, and you could still get the kill. Now, the first thing you need to think about is distraction. When something is going on that could distract your enemy, whether it's contact by a teammate, whether it's an ability, or some noise being made in a different direction, whatever the case may be, when a lot of things are happening, that is when you're more likely to convert on a kill, because when an enemy is distracted or they're not even looking at the angle you're peeking from, that is a way to get an advantage fight. And it doesn't even matter if they were the better shot that day, if they aren't focused on taking that shot. The next way is doing things like flanking or off-angling. Now, I'm not saying that you should flank every single game, but understand when and why it's good. Understand that if you are taking a specific flank or an off angle that an enemy doesn't expect, you can actually get a kill and they can't do anything about it. They can't stop you because they're not even aware of you or looking at you. Another thing that goes along with this is tucking versus challenging. So for instance, you're tucked in a really aggressive corner and the enemy has to rotate all the way through and go to the other side, but maybe you snuck in there, or maybe you got in there after you already showed contact on the other side. So for whatever reason, the enemy is very unlikely to clear you. Now, in that case, you wouldn't want to pop out and challenge both the enemies that are rotating, right? That turns it into a reaction duel, a 1v1 potentially, and you're probably going to get traded out. It's far better for you to tuck, not fight, not challenge, wait for both of them to pass, kill both of them from behind. This is something that you can apply the tactics to the gunfights. You're getting a lot of kills here. You're getting tons of kills based on fighting with distraction, fighting with your teammates, fighting based off angles, tucking in when enemies are unlikely to clear, or taking a 2v1 fight. You're getting a lot of kills here, but the enemy might be a better shot in all of these situations, but it doesn't matter. You're racking up the kills, and that consistency is something that you should be doing. Doesn't matter if you're the mechanical god himself, you still want to be setting up advantage fights consistently, because that's going to take some pressure off of your mechanics. But in some situations, it's unavoidable. In some situations, you use an advantage fight tactic to maybe get 1 kill, but it's still 1v2, and you have to hit an insane shot, and that's when your mechanics come in. Now, the reason that these are numbered from 1 to 4 is I think that when you're just starting, or you're brand new, or your mechanics are god-awful, I think focusing on things like your raw mechanics and doing some aim trainers, or your Valorant weapon mechanics, and focusing on your counter-strafing or your recoil control, that is going to bring you the highest return and improve you the fastest. But when your mechanical skill is above a certain level, or maybe you already have mechanical skill from previous games, what you really need to be focusing on more than anything is your consistency in gunfights and the tactics involved in finding more favorable gunfights. And all in all, if you apply all these things and keep grinding, your mechanical skill will improve. But if you have any questions, definitely let me know down below, and go to the GameLeap website for tips, tricks, warm-up guides, and so much about how to pop off and dominate. Do yourself a favor and go check it out right now down below.